Now, as part of a greater Western campaign to offer reparations for stolen African treasures, Germany has returned about 20 Benin Bronzes to Nigeria. The Benin Bronzes are sculptures and plaques that British soldiers took in 1897 from the ancient Kingdom of Benin, which is now southern Nigeria and not the contemporary country of Benin. When England colonized Nigeria, it is believed that they stole more than 5,000 ancient artifacts from the nation. In a ceremony in the nation's capital, Abuja, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock handed back the priceless cultural artifacts to Nigerian officials and said it was part of efforts to repair its dark colonial past. Baerbock said it was wrong that the artifacts were promising that more would be returned. Now, let's discuss this with African cultural scholar and activist Tharollo Seatlholo. Tharollo, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, what was your initial reaction when Germany first announced that they would be returning the Benin artifacts?
Well, thank you for having me. My initial response was really that, it's not that significant to me. I mean, great for them and their journey towards restoring their moral dignity. However, I was just thinking the impact or what can it do to the Africans who have lost so much cultural history, so many stories that were untold, some things that we may never regain. We could never even trade in terms of art, learn of each other's stories. We weren't allowed to do that. So I was really thinking more of what can it mean to Africa, what can it mean to Nigeria as well, and what can it do because it cannot recover what it is that was lost.
Most certainly. Just talk us through these art pieces. What was it about them that they were considered so prized?
What was it about them that they were considered so prized? I would just think that we should center everything around European imperialism, because if we just limit the issue to the arts, we just lose the value of why it is that they were taken, because it was clearly aesthetic symbolism of the European supremacy. So we should think that, when we were conquered, what was important was economics. And of course, economics goes with politics, but for Europeans, economics determines politics and culture, whereas for us as Africans, it's culture that determines ethics, that determines politics, then economics as well. So to them, what was more important was, of course, the exploitation of labor, the trading, the taxing of Africans as a whole, the taking land, anything that had economic value and that could contribute to European supremacy and just world domination as a whole. So the significance of the art in itself was just a symbol that, these people have been conquered because they could not generate the profits that have been generated from other ways that, they were generating profits from the African continent. So it was just a mark that, we cannot, of course, replicate this, but it's just a symbolic gesture. It's symbolic that, we have conquered these people. And obviously, what is most central to them is art, is culture. Therefore, if we take what is important to them, it's more symbolic of just domination. And as we know, as philosopher Mama Marimba Ane has said, that culture is the immune system of a nation. So it was really just an icing on top of the cake that these people have been dominated more than really the value, the time, the stories that they tell. It was just taking that away from Africans more than anything, more than they could even get economic compensation for that. Of course, they were profiting from displaying them in their museums, but that was not more economically benefiting in comparison to the things that they were doing to Africa in itself.
Most certainly. I mean, you speak of culture. How important is it, especially from a cultural perspective, that it is for young people to be able to experience these ancient cultures through art? What lessons can they derive from ancient art?
what lessons could they derive? Perhaps the question we should ask is what lessons could they derive and what lessons haven't they derived? As I speak of the untold stories of that the art holds in itself, and just even relations amongst the people, because it's just the preservation. I mean, we could speak of our civilization. I mean, there's a lot of the youth that do not know of African civilization, of African history. Certain things are still surprising to them that we were able to do, or even how the art looks, that how could we even configure such things. It's such a pity that some of our arts or some of our philosophies are learned through the Europeans, whereas we could just be teaching ourselves. So of course culture is important, and this is the loss that I speak, that we cannot recover, and that's why I'm saying it cannot really mean that much to us, more than it can mean moral dignity or morality tokens for Germany in itself. And I mean, on that note of Germany, it's quite interesting that they are able to pull out this morality gesture, but they were unable. They still have not paid reparations for the. They still have not paid reparations for the Namibian genocide, and of course they were able to pay reparations for the Jewish Holocaust, which is still a devastation to the European nation. But of course, when it comes to African lives, African art also involved there, it is not that important. And speaking of Germany as well and its colonial history, we should remember that it facilitated the negotiations in the Berlin Conference in 1844 to 1845, also known as the Scramble for Africa. So there's more than just art that also needs to be confronted. And part of my thoughts were that it's perhaps a gesture through art because it's the most, it's minimal, and it has also been such a strenuous exercise because it's taken them 10 years. I mean, first of all, we needed to negotiate to get the Benin Bronzes back, but it's just minimal that they could do. What does it mean for gold? What does it mean for diamonds that they are still able to profit from? So art as although it's still important to us, and Africans are an artistic people, we are creative in nature, and we have tried to recover our artistic instincts. It cannot mean the same to Europeans as it does to us, and even its recovery as well. It's just one of those. Thanks for being moral. Yeah.
But why do you think it takes so long and so much for many of these European countries to just recognize the wrongs that were done to Africans and correct them?
Because it poses a threat to the destruction of their supremacy. I mean, you can imagine, if they use so much from us to build their civilization, what we know as their civilization, just the acknowledgement of even a small piece of art, let's say the Benin Bronzes, it might lead the conversation to a bigger topic, such as, of course, I've spoken of diamonds, of gold, of land. It's so dangerous. It's such a threat to them that it can destroy their entire civilization. So on their parts, I guess it's not a good idea to actually open this up and just start talking about it, because as we are talking right now, it opens up a whole lot of things. What about the other injustices? Why does this matter more?
Most certainly. Now, still speaking of these pieces, we know that they are among a large number of artworks taken from Benin and sold, which the bulk still sits in Europe. Will this act by the Germans possibly prompt others to do right by those that they stole from?
I do not necessarily think so, and I think we should also investigate why it is that Germany took such a role. Part of my thoughts were that perhaps they're trying to create a foundation to the oil trade between them and Nigeria. It might be beneficial in their future as an individual nation, but if we think that it would do right, or other European nations could learn from them, we need to think that we need to remember that Nigeria in itself, I mean, in terms of its British relations, as Lugard had said, that it was a fair trade. According to them, it was a fair trade, that they would be civilizing Nigeria, and they would, in their pay, they would be taking the resources, they'd be taking the arts, they'd be taking everything of theirs as payment while they are developing Nigeria. So, I mean, of course, in honesty, the development of Europe is the underdevelopment of Africa, but I do not think that other nations would follow suit, simply because they believe that they have civilized the African nation as well, and they have, everything is fair. It's just a fair trade, so there's no there's no need for them to actually to actually restore anything, because we've had a fair trade, we are civilized, we speak English, we are modernized, we are Europeanized. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Tharollo. Thank you for that update and for giving us some of that insight within that which has happened between Benin and now Germany. That was African cultural scholar and activist Tharollo Seatlholo.